you hear that okay? Is it just going to the cameras, or is it actually live? Okay. All set? All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a celebration of the life and legacies of Silver Donald Cameron. I recognize most of the faces in the room, but not all the faces, and I know that we're being recorded and live streamed at the same time. So, by way of introduction, my name is Andy Parnaby. I'm an Associate Professor of History at Cape Breton University, and also the Dean of Arts and Social Sciences. And it's my great pleasure to be here this afternoon. And I'll serve as sort of your host or your air traffic controller for the next 90 minutes or so. During that time, there's an agenda on each table. During that 90 minutes to 2 hours, the plan is to hear lots of stories about Silver Donald Cameron. And some of those stories will be live from the people in this room, which is wonderful. And some of those stories are pre-recorded, and you'll see them on the video screen to my right. And I'll try and do my best to thread those live and recorded stories together in some way as we go along. Now, on my way over here this afternoon, I had just sort of two thoughts as I was driving. The first was about how perfect this venue is. Because when I think of the convent, I think of a place that's rooted in the island and is really going to lead it to the future through this combination of the arts and the real serious entrepreneurial kind of hustle. And it reminded me of Don, someone equally committed to the island and someone who was very passionate about all the projects that he undertook. My second thought was just how fortunate I was to work with Don for the short period of time that I did. He was sort of a late entry into my life, just since he joined Cape Breton University lately. But in that short period of collaboration, I glimpsed the creative and compassionate person that all of you know and love, and also that basic human openness he has to other people that made him so special. And so I'm grateful for that short period of time that we worked together. So let's spend the next 90 minutes, 2 hours, sharing stories, remembering and celebrating. And to begin, I'd like to welcome my friend and colleague Stephen Augustine up to the front of the room to offer an opening prayer, some words of welcome, and to get us going. Stephen?
Good afternoon. Reminds me of something James Joyce wrote, Finnegan's Wake. It was hard reading. Today I want to welcome the spirits of our ancestors, the birds, plants, animals, and fish, trees, plants, to join us. And in giving words, usually I'm representing the collectivity to offer my words. We say Al-Sudamaan in Mi'kmaq. It's like I hear words everywhere around me. So I'm going to be sending these words from our heart, our spirit, to the giver of life we call Gizulk. Gizulk, he made everything. He made it in the past, he's making it today, and next week when you wake up, he'll still be making it. It'll be out there. So Gizulk is creation. Then we look at grandfather son. And the grandfather son, we say, Niskamij Nagusit, Nagewaset Niskamij. My grandfather who shines during the day. And I owe my shadow to my grandfather, the sun. And through my shadow, we call Jija Amich, we see the images of our ancestors who have gone past, who've gone into the spirit world. So we're connected to them by our feet. And grandfather, he gave to us our heartbeat, and the lung, gamulamun and gamulami, is like two things. One pumps air or breathes air, and the other one pumps blood and breathes blood. And that pumping and energy of blood goes down to our feet to connect with our ancestors. And they're following us around all day, every day, and they're protecting us, they're guiding us, so that we understand we are not alone. And so we thank Grandfather Sun for giving us our shadows, our spirit. Then we thank Mother Earth for providing us with all the necessities of life that we need to survive and to exist. So we are grateful that we have the birds, plants, animals, and fish, and fire and water and air and earth, so that we can sustain ourselves on Mother Earth, so that she provides us our existence. And we as human beings come from Mother Earth. We peeled ourselves. Uskijinu, Weskijinualit, is to peel yourself from Mother Earth. Skijinu, Innu, Ulnu, Inu, Inuit, Ulnua. So those are all the words that refer to people of the land, the people that are part of Mother Earth. They belong to the land. Ulnu, Ulnua, Inu. So we are grateful that we have the giver of life who gave us life, Grandfather Sun who put spirit into our life, and Mother Earth who sustains our lives with all the necessities that we need. Then we look to the direction of the rising sun. We thank Geluluskap, or Galuskap, the first one who spoke. And he gives us an example of a way of life that we need to live in order to survive, be strong, and be healthy. So he shows us a way of life that we need to follow. And we are grateful. So we are grateful for our leaders, our chiefs, our elders, our mayors and council people, councilmen, people who are leading us in this country and around the world. So we are grateful for our leaders, the direction of the rising sun. We look to the south to thank our grandmothers, the knowledge, wisdom keepers. And they are there to teach us how to survive on Mother Earth. And the first one who spoke, Gluskap, was taught by his grandmother how to survive, how to live, and what to eat, what not to eat, and when and how. And he learned the characteristics and behavior of birds, plants, animals, and fish. And this is how he learned to negotiate his survival with those entities. So we are grateful that Gluskap had his grandmother, Nugami, to teach him everything he needed to know to survive on Mother Earth. Then we look to the direction of the setting sun, to the west. We are grateful for the young people that are brought into this world. And the young people are there to look at us as adults. And we as adults have a responsibility to those young children, because we have to live a way of life that is meaningful to them, that we have to leave a legacy of survival for the future generations, so that they will have a healthy and strong future in their lives, because they will become our next leaders. We are grateful for the young people in the West. Then we look to the North to thank our mothers that brought us into this world. When we could not look after ourselves, they fed us, they cleaned us, and growing up, they admonished us and told us how to behave with one another as brothers and sisters. We had to rely on each other and love one another. Otherwise, we would not survive if we fought each other and killed each other. So we are grateful that we have this wonderful story of creation as a prayer to remind us our relationship as a human being to one another, to the animals, birds, plants, animals, and fish. And we are grateful that we are here today to celebrate the life of Silver Donald Cameron. Walalio, thank you. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about Silver Donald and how I got to know him. In the early 70s and 80s, I knew about him. I knew about Donald Cameron, Silver Donald, and I learned about him at St. Thomas University at UNB and some of the writings of his books. And later on, I became a coordinator of a literacy program for the province of New Brunswick. And I was, it was in 1990, the International Year of Literacy. And so a year before, or 6 months before, in 1989, I was appointed to be the literacy coordinator for the province. I had been working for New Brunswick Community College in Chatham, and so they asked if I would take on this extra task to coordinate literacy program for the whole province. So I had to travel all over St. John River Valley and up the coast in the North Shore, they call it, and all around Moncton, St. John, St. Stephen. And finally, we organized an event to bring adult learners through this Lobok literacy program. We brought adult, mostly senior, some of them were 24, 25 that had dropped out of school and wanted to catch on how to learn and read and write and to express themselves properly. So we invited Lee Maracle. She was a West Coast Indigenous person, Coast Salish, from Vancouver. She grew up in North Van. And she had written several books and published them on her own. And so we were excited to have her come and talk to some of the people that we invited. And the other special guest was Silver Donald Cameron. He came from Nova Scotia, and he showed up in New Brunswick, and we had the big event in Chatham, up in the Miramichi. And so this was the first time I personally met Silver Donald. And so we had a very engaging conversation with Lee Maracle, which Terry has met through a conference she hosted a couple of weeks ago or last week. Time is just so irrelevant nowadays. So we got together and we got started to speak about literacy, the whole issue of literacy. And it was Donald that came up to me and he says, Stephen, he says, you know, among our society, he said, if you are called or termed an illiterate, it's a negative connotation about you in society. And he said, how about you people? He said, excuse me, I don't mean to call you you people. He said, how about your people? He said, you're mostly an oral society. And what is it about literacy in your culture? And I said, well, it's not a negative connotation among our people. I mean, that you can't write, because most of our people only got into the education system seriously in the late 50s and the 60s. A lot of us went to school, Indian day schools or residential schools, going back into the 1920s, 29, 30s, and then the the Indian day schools were running all along. But writing and reading and was not really a big enterprise among our people. So it was not considered to be a negative image upon ourselves if we couldn't read or if we couldn't write. I mean, it was expected of us not to read and not to write in mainstream society. And we didn't hold a big impact until only recently, within the last 40, 50 years. And he said, well, I figured as much. Because he said, I read in history from Champlain, from Lescarbot, from Abbe Maillard, Frank Speck, that the Indians, they would have really long oral traditions. They would speak for a very long, long time without notes, without anything. And they would enunciate and keep speaking all day sometimes, in the morning till end of the evening. They would just go on and speak. So oral tradition among your people must be what can be considered as a mastery of writing in our culture. And he said, so one of the things that we initiated as a result of this was we developed an education program in our own community in Big Cove, New Brunswick, where we brought dropouts into classroom, and we started the class with oral history, oral traditions. Our elders came into the classroom and gave stories. Young people that had dropped out of school, they were like 16 to 24, something like that. And it was a manpower program. And it was like called an upgrading program. And so by starting them off with listening to oral history, which was quite an influence from Donald Cameron, that we started them off, and then we started to record why much about these stories. And so we gave them fools, those big squares of paper. What is it? Flip charts, or they're thicker than the flip chart paper. Bristol board. Yes. So we gave out 40 sheets of these, and the students went out and started drawing images from the stories that were given to them by the elders. And then the next step was to record them. These were instructions from Donald Cameron. Record them and have them record themselves. Give them the cameras and have them. And then the students, they had to dress up, look nice and clean. And then we made a treaty saying that everybody is going to look like this when they come to class every day, as if you're ready to go and present yourself in front of a camera. So that went over really well because there was a program, a life skills program that the manpower, they had it for 2-3 weeks or 4 weeks. And our people, they don't like to be told, you should do this or you should do that. Comb your hair, cut your fingernails, brush your teeth, and all that kind of stuff. You're intruding on the personality of that individual. And that's not the way our people are. We're very non-intrusive. So by doing this, though, it allowed people to really be mindful of how they looked, and it worked. So they recorded each other after they produced these beautiful paintings and drawings from the stories. And then Silver Donald said, have them do expository writing. I said, what's that? He said, well, you write, just consistently write without minding whether you're using capitals or commas or periods or paragraphs and so on. You just write as to what you think you're trying to say. And so this is what they did. Some very shy individuals, they wrote a half a page, but some of the more smarter ones or wordy ones, they wrote 20 pages what their artwork represented. And so from there on, we started evaluating each of the students separately, individually, rather than in a classroom. And this is how we started our literacy program, our upgrading program, and the students. This is the first time we started. We had about 6 of these false starts in our community. 20, 30, 40 students started, and within a month they were all gone, nobody returned. 2 or 3 were there, and it wasn't worth for manpower to hire a teacher to come to our reserve and teach these classes. But this was the first time all 40 students stayed for the 42-week program. So we were grateful. And I attribute this to Silver Donald, and we've remained friends since that time, 1990. And he's called upon me to advise him on green interviews, who can we call to come here so we can interview them, John Burroughs, some of them from out west, Leroy Little Bear, some of the Aboriginal lawyers, Indigenous scholars, and so on and so forth. And we had held conversations and different radio sessions, and we were really working on one last year in December. And somehow we got our dates confused, and the people that were supposed to be doing the filming were not ready, and so he had to cancel it, and we'll extend it to after January sometime, and then COVID hit us. So that was my relationship with Silver Donald, and he gave me this book. He said, "You want to know more about me? Read this book, Silver Donald Cameron, Sterling Silver." It was published, I think, in 1994, 1994, and it was about some of the writings he did. Ron Kaplan was the editor, and in some of these he wrote about Stan Rogers, the legacy of Stan Rogers, and he kind of quoted a lot of from his songs. Barrett's Privateers. One of the lasting ones was Mary Ellen Carter, Rise Again. So he and Fairleigh Mowat, A Prophet, and some of the other things were writing, going to a funeral, somebody's funeral, and all the funerals that were happening around Ilmadam and all these people, and his whole story around his life was people in Cape Breton, people in Nova Scotia. He was a very proud Nova Scotian, proud Cape Bretoner, and he loved Cape Breton, and also he had a very strong heart for the indigenous people. And then he went into the environmental consciousness, videos and interviews that highlighted that aspect of society. He was a very dear friend, and I truly missed him, and I was shocked when I heard the news at one of our meetings at CBU that he had passed. And anyway, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share these words about my friend Silver Donald Walalio. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, for that wonderful story about Silver Donald and literacy and learning. There's a lot in there that symbolizes so many of the projects and initiatives that he worked on. And thank you, too, for the opening prayer. I think I speak for everyone here when I say that we're grateful for you. So thank you for those words to open our session here this afternoon. You mentioned Silver Donald's connection to the island. He's had extensive connections to the university, too. And over the course of this afternoon, you'll hear from many university people, some of whom are here, which is wonderful. Great to see you, Jackie. And some will be recorded. Our first message, our first recorded message, is by Richard McKinnon, who is the Vice President, Academic and Provost, speaking for himself, I think also representing the President, David Dingwall. So we'll take a look at that short contribution now.
Hi, I'm here to talk about Silver Donald and his connections to Cape Breton University, and they go back a long way. In fact, they go back to 1978 when we were College of Cape Breton, and Silver Donald was a writer in residence at the university for a couple of years. Then, of course, when we became the University College of Cape Breton, he joined us again as inaugural dean for the School of Community Studies, where he taught some courses for us in problem-centered studies. I knew him well then. I was a chair of a department, and I worked closely with him as we grew the School of Community Studies and the bachelor's degree. Then again, when we became a Cape Breton University, he joined us again. He received an honorary degree from us in 2007. Also, in 2019, became the inaugural Farley Mowat chair in environment, and again, where he continued his research, the Green Project, did interviews with over 100 environmentalists around the world, continued to write his books and do his research. Again, a big supporter of Cape Breton University, and again, he's won many awards, too numerous to mention, but including the Order of Canada, the Order of Nova Scotia, member of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, numerous awards for his writing and his articles. He's published hundreds of articles, national and international magazines, and at last count, over 20 books. So again, he's been a good supporter of Cape Breton University, and we're proud to have Silver Donald associated with Cape Breton University.
Now, as many of you know, Silver Donald was a real, I don't know what the right word is, a real polymath, a real jack of all trades, and strikingly a master of all of them. Journalist, author, playwright, university teacher, and an activist. And across much of this activity, there are there's some common themes that do emerge. Love of the ocean is actually a pretty striking one that I find fascinating. A real talent for writing about ordinary people in extraordinary times and circumstances is another. Notably, I think, there's also that ongoing dedication to human rights and the sustainability of the planet. And those two ideas come through quite strongly in the Green Interview Project and its companion book about warrior lawyers. And we'll hear a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, on that final point, just the strong emphasis on human rights and sustainability of the planet, we have two additional pre-recorded testimonials. One with Elizabeth May, who you know is the former leader of the Green Party of Canada, author and activist herself, and David Suzuki, a well-known personality and longtime host of The Nature of Things. We have two pre-recorded things to take a look at, and I believe we're going to run them maybe back to back. Is that right? Sounds great. So Elizabeth May first, and then David Suzuki.
When I reserved this spot for a member's statement some time ago, I wanted to acknowledge that today is World Oceans Day and speak to the threats to our oceans. But instead, 1 week ago today, we lost one of our champions of oceans. We lost a giant in the world of literature, campaigning for a better world, someone who was loved by many. Silver Donald Cameron, one of Canada's leading journalists, author of 20 books, died a week ago today after a very sudden, fierce diagnosis of lung cancer that killed him within the week. He was a member of the Order of Canada, a member of the Order of Nova Scotia. Born in Toronto, raised in British Columbia, he chose Cape Breton Island for his home in 1971 and lived in the little fishing village of Discoos. His last book will come out in August, Blood in the Water. I have to say, he's left an enormous hole in our hearts, in the work of the environmental movement, and the world of Canadian literature. Rest in peace, dear sailor Don Cameron.
As we work to build and spread an ecological perspective to shape our priorities and actions, I understand that no one person or organization is indispensable to the movement. As we work to build and spread an ecological perspective to shape our priorities and actions, I understand that no one person or organization is indispensable to the movement. I believe we can achieve enormous things so long as we're not hung up about who gets credit. Having said that, at every level of society, from the local to the international, individuals from Rachel Carson to Bill McKibben and Greta Thunberg can galvanize a movement. And Sylver Donald Cameron was one of those, a towering figure in the environmental movement in Canada. It's an enormous shock, a stab in the heart, when a beloved figure so passionate and charismatic and full of vitality dies suddenly and unexpectedly. I regret that I never got to know Sylver Don well, never spent time over a beer chatting and arguing, but I followed his work from a distance with gratitude and admiration. He took part in our Blue Dot campaign to galvanize public support to enshrine the right to a healthy environment in law, and I got to see him in action close up. He connected with audiences in an impactful and thoughtful way, and with great humor that few of us can match. And I was grateful for the generous and enthusiastic manner in which he joined us. Of course, he interviewed just about every significant environmentalist in the world to leave a permanent legacy of his ideas. To his family and all who knew and loved him, I add my profound condolences and share the sorrow of his loss. Don was a warrior who will be kept alive by his work and our memories of him as we carry on with the movement in which he was such an important part.
Before we keep moving along, is there any quick AV checks that anyone would like to perform? I mean, we've got the audio, which is great. So much of Don's life and legacy is about words, and if we just listen carefully, that might just do the trick too. Just that one clip? Okay, perfect. So, well, that's good, because if it's just the one file, then it's not something with the camera, for example. Well, we're on the theme of human rights and sustainability of the planet. Strong words from Elizabeth May and strong words also from David Suzuki. We have another perspective broadly on the same theme, and this is from David Boyd, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Environment, and one of the many individuals featured in the book Warrior Lawyers. I think he's even the first, he might even be the first chapter, actually, now that I come to think about it. But we've got a piece by him. It's a little bit longer, a little more substantive, and really develops the themes introduced by Elizabeth May and David Suzuki. So we'll watch that contribution now.
Hi there, my name is David Boyd, and I'm joining you from Pender Island on the west coast of Canada, one of Sylver Donald Cameron's many homes away from home. I first got to know Don back in 2012. I was at the very last event on a cross-Canada book tour, taking the train, stopped in about 20 different cities, and my final stop was at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, mostly speaking to a group of law students, but there was one silver-haired gentleman sitting quietly in the back row. And after the lecture was over, he came up and introduced himself, Sylver Donald Cameron. And he proceeded to grill me about the right to a healthy environment. My book was called The Environmental Rights Revolution, a global study of constitutions, human rights, and the environment. And this book and these ideas had just set Sylver Donald Cameron on fire. You could see the excitement, the passion, the neurons were flashing in his mind. And really, we stood there at the end of this lecture and spoke for at least an hour, maybe 2 hours, until finally a caretaker came in and kind of politely ushered us out of the law school building there at Dalhousie University. But not before Don had made me promise that I would get up and do interview with him for his Green Interview series the very next morning. So we got acquainted that evening, we got acquainted the next day, and that was the start of a friendship that spanned the rest of his life. And it was really like meeting meeting a soul brother or an intellectual brother. It was friendship at first sight. And I'm eternally grateful for the gift of friendship that Silver Donald Cameron shared with me. And to his credit, he took the idea that I was promoting, the concept of a human right to live in a healthy environment, and he ran with it. He did things that I never would have imagined doing. You know, he created a film called Green Rights, the human right to a healthy planet. He wrote a book called Warrior Lawyers, where he took a bunch of interviews. He completed his Green Interview series, he completed over 100 of these green interviews, set up the greenrights.com website. And I'm really pleased to say that while Don is gone, his dream is still alive. And so I'm currently serving as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, and really pushing at the United Nations for global recognition that we all have this fundamental human right, the right to live in a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And that process has been underway for decades, to be fair, but we're very close now. I'm working with an amazing group of states led by Costa Rica, Slovenia, Fiji, Monaco, and others at the United Nations. And I believe that sometime within the next year, we will get that pioneering United Nations resolution recognizing for the first time what Don saw as a unifying theory of environmental law, the right to a healthy environment. And as one of Don's warrior lawyers, I'm also using my United Nations position to intervene in really important lawsuits all around the world. And I really wish that I could have a conversation with Don about some of these cases, because I know that he would jump up and down with excitement. I'm involved in a case that's before the UN Human Rights Committee brought by the Torres Strait Islanders, arguing that Australia's complete train wreck of climate policies and failure to reduce emissions violates their fundamental rights under the UN International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, their rights to life, their rights to health, and their rights to culture. I'm also involved in a case that's currently before the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, a case that 16 young people brought against Argentina, Brazil, France, Germany, and Turkey, arguing that their rights as young people under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child are being violated. I'm also involved in lawsuits at the national level in Norway, where a group of young people and Greenpeace have sued the Norwegian government for allowing offshore oil and gas exploration in the Arctic Ocean, arguing that that violates their right to a healthy environment under the Norwegian Constitution, Article 112. I'm involved in an air pollution case in South Africa, where some of the worst air pollution in the world is being foisted upon a poor, predominantly black community in the Highveld region called Mpumalanga. And again, some lawyers there have crafted an argument that says, look, South Africa's constitution guarantees the right to a healthy environment. How can that possibly be reconciled with some of the world's worst air quality? And most recently, I engaged in a lawsuit in Brazil where a number of political parties filed a lawsuit arguing that the Bolsonaro administration's terrible climate record is a violation of their constitutional right to a healthy environment. And we had a terrific hearing in front of a Supreme Court judge back in September, and I'm very optimistic that we'll get a great judgment in that case. So on many levels, the dream that Don had of a universal or a global right to a healthy environment continues. We're also very close in Canada to a breakthrough, and I know this was particularly near and dear to Don's heart, and he worked ferociously with the David Suzuki Foundation and the Sierra Club of Canada and EcoJustice to help bring this about. But the Trudeau government is now committed to finally modernizing the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, and at this point, one of the key elements of that modernization will be, for the first time, Canada recognizing the right to a healthy environment. So exciting things happening here at home, exciting things happening in the world. And as Don said in his book, he really felt like he was part of a far-flung community of people joined by similar minds, similar hearts, and similar spirits. And Although Don is gone, he'll always be part of that community in my mind and in my heart and in my spirit. So thank you to Silver Donald Cameron for being such a wonderful human being and for being a good friend. Thank you.
It's pretty clear that education was significant and important to Silver Donald. And his teaching could take many forms. Stephen's early example is a good indication of that. This latest clip is an interesting example as well. Don spent a good portion of his career in and out of various universities. First at the University of British Columbia, then University of New Brunswick, some time in Dalhousie, and in most recent years at CBU as the Farley Mowat Chair in Environment. Now that latest position was a homecoming for him because as Richard McKinnon noted in an earlier video, he had served as a writer in residence and in fact was one of the first deans, if not the first dean, of community studies at what was then UCCB. Just as a side note, occasionally I come across old files that Silver Donald left in the dean's office. And I mean, the guy, even his budget memos or grievance memos are well written. Like it's just, I mean, words came so beautifully to him even when he was writing and begging a president for more money. Our next few contributions will reflect on this contribution to post-secondary education, specifically the CBU example. And we have a recorded recollection by Dana Mount, who's a professor of English and co-director of the Bachelor of Arts and Science and Environment program. And then we'll have a live contribution from Jane Arnold from the Beaton Institute, who is here with us in the audience. We'll just run those two right together. I won't jump up here between the two. So Dana first, and then we'll hear from Jane.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to be part of the celebration today. I was really honored to be able to say a few words and to be able to offer some perspective on the impact that Silver Donald made at CBU in his time here. I'm Dana Mount. I am the Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies at Cape Breton University, but today I'm speaking from my role as one of the co-directors of the Bachelor of Arts and Science in Environment at CBU. We call it the BASE program, and as soon as Donald got here to CBU, he heard about the program and we connected, and it really is a program that brings together the arts and the sciences under the theme and banner of environmental issues and environmental passion and activism. So this was a really going to be the beginning of a wonderful friendship. Deanna and I, Deanne Van Rooyen, she's the other co-director, she's in geology. Deanna and I were so excited to learn that Donald would be joining CBU as the Farley Mowat Chair. It was a chance for our program, the BASE program, to benefit from the lifetime of experience that Donald brought as an educator, writer, and activist. We are forever telling our students that environmental action requires passion and clear communication, and these are two things that Donald certainly embodied and brought with him wherever he went. His Green Interview series represents environmental justice voices from around the world, and his clear, measured interviewing style carries the series along in a meaningful way. It was a resource that we were keen to share with our students, and one that he was excited to get in anyone's hands that he could. Something he was tremendously proud of, and I think that pride, as well as the excellent product that he produced, together represented something that we wanted to share with our students, which was how to go about working in the environmental sector in a meaningful way and in a way filled with dignity. Dan and I were just at the beginning stages of thinking through how Donald's body of work might have the most impact for our students in the BASE program. And he did deliver one course that some of our students were able to take, and we took for granted maybe that this was just going to be the beginning of a string of opportunities for our students to benefit from his knowledge and for us to have a back and forth about teaching and pedagogy. I know that reaching students and communicating his vision and his passion was something that drove him. You could see it when he talked about teaching, and connecting with those students in his class was as important as connecting with people on the international sphere and scope. So we really appreciated that everyday humility and everyday commitment that he brought to his work. And again, are so sorry that what we thought was the beginning of what would be a long relationship ended up being curtailed. We want to share our condolences to his family and friends and know that we'll, so many of us will continue to carry on the type of work and vision that he represented and embodied, and CBU will forever be grateful for what he brought during his short time here in this last position he held as the Farley Mowat Chair. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.
Thanks for the invitation, Terry. And I would like to pass along sincere condolences to Marjorie and all of Don's family and friends. Like so many, my introduction to Silver Donald Cameron was through his writing, specifically his sailing adventures. As a new boat owner, his stories of sailing away from winter and others made us envious, but also gave us a sense of the reality of cruising life. Shortly after starting my job at the Beaton Institute, I began working with Don's personal papers and was amazed at the diversity in the collection. So at the time, I knew very little about the community television station Tel-Il, his company Paper Tiger, or how prolific his publishing had been. His collection speaks to a natural curiosity, and to have curiosity about life, people, and your surroundings is admirable. To energize that curiosity to create change and to educate is even more admirable, but to effect change is exemplary. Don, to the very last few months that I saw him, had an intense and singular interest in improving the world, our communities, and sharing stories that could help and heal. At all times, this hard work was completed or attempted with a great sense of humor and levity. Our last conversation was about his trip to China that was clearly one of the most memorable of his life, and he handed over a few fantastic photographs of him with Jack O'Donnell, the conductor of the Men of the Deeps at the time. He then handed me another souvenir from the trip, and we spent a few moments marveling at a program from a famous burlesque club in Tokyo. You never know what you'll find in the archive. So in a 1977 article in Axiom magazine titled "Now at the Hour of Our Death," and I think it's in sterling silver as well, Don writes beautifully about loss and faith in his community of Discoos and focuses on his own mortality. He writes, "It occurs to me that I do not want eternal life any more than I would want perennial wakefulness without sleep. I can conceive of no life more perfect than this one." And he goes on that, "It shakes me to contemplate the towering beauty of the world out there, the fellowship of human community, the magnificence and poignancy of love, the sturdy courage of men and women walking every day a further mile along the road that leads to the grave." Don's collection is extensive and significant, drawing requests from around the world to access his writings. My hope that when the entire collection is finally fully described and available, it reflects the intellectual curiosity, humor, dedicated work ethic, and love of the natural world and all its pleasures that to me was Don. So as we know and have heard, CBU and his students were always at the forefront of Don's mind. And he may not have envisioned how his collection at the archive would contribute to his legacy as an educator at CBU. In 2010, we started the Beaton Institute internship program, offering students, usually history students, the opportunity to take a 6-credit course that operated a bit like a co-op opportunity. And it has since graduated over 20 students from a variety of disciplines, including history, folklore, community studies, and Mi'kmaq studies. Heather Green was one of the first Beaton Institute interns who completed the 6-credit course in 2011. She is now Dr. Green and teaches Canadian, environmental, and Indigenous history at St. Mary's University. Unfortunately, she couldn't be with us here today, but she wanted to share a reflection on working with Don's collection at the Beaton. So Heather writes, I had never met Don Cameron, but feel I know him on a personal level. After my work as an intern at the Beaton Institute in my final year at CBU in 2011, where I appraised, sorted, and arranged an extensive donation he'd made to the archive. I spent 7 months sorting through his records, both professional and personal, which spanned from 1971 to 2005. As an archival intern, I spent 34 years with Silver Donald. He shared his visions for environmental activism, success and failures in community economic development, and his personal journey through life, love, and loss with me, without ever having met. What struck me most about Don's collection was the volume of material which reflected his efforts to create a better future for Cape Breton and the Maritimes more broadly, while also celebrating our history, heritage, and culture. Since my time working with his records at the Beaton, in my professional life, I've encountered Don's talks on climate change and sustainability and remained amazed at his lifelong efforts at bringing environmental education and change to global audiences. He was a rare breed, and he granted us all the ability to continue to learn from him, his passion for activism, and his love for the Maritimes. It only takes a trip to the archives. So thank you on behalf of Heather and I. I'll miss Don's visits very much. Thank you.
Oh, yes, right. Thanks a lot, Jane. Hearing references to Heather Green, this is starting to feel a bit like an old home week. Old former graduates working on projects, now teaching, and the circles within circles, I suppose. We have heard on and off references to Don's project, The Green Interview, and its link to this book called Warrior Lawyers. And our next recorded piece is from that project. And we'll give you a sense for the issues, the interview style, and Don's commitment to human rights and environmental sustainability.
Our most important problems are not out there. We can stop global warming, we can pull carbon back out of the air, we can stop destroying forests and birds and animals. We can purify the water. We know how to do all that. No, our worst problems are here, between our ears. And that's why it's important to know people who are full of practical knowledge and soaring imagination and unquenchable hope. People who study and protect wildlife. People who create non-polluting cars, protect seeds, and build organic rooftop farms. Indigenous wisdom keepers and artisans and scholars. Scientists who understand climate change and coral reefs and fish populations. Authors and journalists and artists and musicians who improvise with birds and whales. Lawyers in somber courtrooms defending the living world. Teenagers fighting for food they can trust and rivers they can swim in. Business owners and investors shaping a healthy economy. Political leaders with ecology in their hearts and their policies. These are the people you'll meet at the Green Interview. More than 100 of them now, and new ones all the time. Our most important problems are here, and our most important solutions will come from here too. That's why education is important. That's why solid journalism is important. That's why the Green Interview is important.
We've been talking a lot about Don's career. We haven't yet talked much about his family. And it's only fitting that we have that perspective here this afternoon. For that, I'd like to turn to Jackie Scott. Jackie Scott, many of you know, is a former president of Cape Breton University and is a professor in the Shannon School of Business. And she brings with her a contribution from Marjorie Simmons, Don's widow. I can bring the microphone to you, Jackie, if you'd like to come up. Perfect. Yep.
afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here, and especially a pleasure to represent Marjorie, who is also a dear friend. She's asked me to read these comments, and it's an honor to do so. My name is Marjorie Simmons. I am Silver Donald Cameron's widow. My deep thanks to former CBU president and our dear friend Jackie Scott for kindly reading my message to you all. Don's family and I would like to thank Cape Breton University for this warm remembrance of Don's life, which underscores his cherished connection to the university. Don was always proud of CBU as an institution. He called it the small university that could, and loved the innovative and life-enhancing academic options CBU offered its students and staff. He enjoyed its caring, small-town feel and its bold global outlook. He spoke of the colleagues he worked with and presidents he served under with great respect and affection. When he stepped through the doors of the university, he was smiling, ready to enjoy another stimulating day with students from around the world. He came home from a day at the university still smiling, with uplifting stories to share. At the time of his death, Don was proudly serving as the first Farley Mowat Chair in the Environment. He was also continuing to work on the Green Interview, his great passion for the past 10 years. The Green Interview is an online resource that offers over 100 interviews with many of the world's most distinguished environmentalists and activists. These men and women serve on the front lines as environmental warriors in their roles as scientists, writers, lawyers, professors, and so on. They share a common sense of urgency to keep our oceans, rivers, air, earth clean and thriving for all the world's creatures and humans to live lives of safety, peace, and dignity. As a film archive, its importance to future generations of scholars and researchers is incalculable. Silver Donald Cameron's literary archive is housed with Cape Breton University for students and researchers to enjoy and work with in the years to come. It contains documentation about his written work, starting with his 20 books. His final nonfiction book, Blood in the Water, a true story of revenge in the Maritimes, was published in August of 2020 and was an instant bestseller. The literary archive also includes the journalistic pieces, radio plays, and films that he created in more than 50 years as the only writer making a full-time living in Cape Breton. Many thanks again to Cape Breton University, which has done so well in this current time of uncertainty and illness to keep staff and students well and to get back as soon as possible to the business and joy of teaching and learning. We are grateful for this respectful tribute to our beloved Don. To all of you who were colleagues and friends from coast to coast to coast, please know that Silver Donald Cameron was honored to spend time with you and to be associated with this small university that could, with its tiger heart and scholar's soul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. We're getting near the end of our formal program. This last little segment in my notes, it just says time to share some stories. And Jackie, you're on that list, so you might have to pop up a bit later to maybe offer some reflections. But first on my list is Albert Marshall, who's here from. Are you here from Eskasoni, Albert? Is that right? Would you like to come up and share some reminiscences of Silver Donald? All right, all yours. And then maybe Jackie to follow, and then we have some pre-recorded segments as well.
Thank you very much. As Donald would say, the less we talk and the more actions we do. And I'll try to abide by that. But I would have to say, you know, I don't believe I have known Donald as long as maybe as most of you, but I first met Donald when he was living in Discourse. during the construction of his sailboat and eventually sailing it into the Bador Lakes. And I was just riding on the on my wife's lecturing things that I managed to meet Donald. And through the years, I believe we became somewhat close. He was very much dear to us because way with Donald, he can talk to anyone, even us in a grassroots level. And he would make it a point that he was very much interested in what we were saying. There's no question that he was very much environmentalist in every sense of the word. So through the years, he not only made a concerted effort of just hearing our words, but also applying our ways of knowing into the mainstream. This is something that I believe we are very much indebted to Donald, because it is something in which he was very, very concerned and very interested of trying to find a way as to how can we continuously involve and include our Aboriginal ways of knowing, our Aboriginal ways of being into the mainstream. The last conversation we had, of course, centered around the amount of bombs that are sitting on the floors of the Bador Lakes. That really struck a lot of interest in him. And we had hoped that maybe someday soon we can carry on that conversation, of even just to bring that awareness out and to look at the possibilities of what are the biological or ecological repercussions if those bombs were allowed to set at the Bador Lakes until the time in which they would have to deteriorate and probably release some of those things that made up those bombs. So this is just all I have to say. And I believe on behalf of the elders in Unama'ki, we are forever indebted to Donald for always making an effort, not just to include our words, but our ways of being, and to always find a way as to how can we continuously to work together. After all, he says, we have a common objective, and that is to ensure that while we are here, we want to make sure that when we leave this place, we're going to try to make it better than when we first came upon it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jackie, would you like to come forward and share some memories of Don, and then we have a couple of recorded sessions to follow. Yeah, we're going to keep.
I can't honestly remember when I first met Silver Donald Cameron. It was some years before I came to Cape Breton, so I think it must have been the last half of the 1980s. Had to be in Toronto, and perhaps when we were both at some scholarly or activist meeting, or maybe he was walking down St. George Street with his brother David Cameron, who a political scientist at U of T, who I'd spoken a few times. Or we both might have been volunteering at some event for literacy that Peter Zosky had corralled us for. I can't pin it down as a moment of acquaintanceship. You know how when you meet new people, sometimes you think, I'm going to be friends with this person for years and years and years. Well, it wasn't like that when Silver Donald and I met. But when I look back on all of our subsequent years of friendship, I remember a cluster of things that drew me to his writing and to our conversations. First, he was a Renaissance man, widely read and knowledgeable about many things, both intellectual and manual, from high-level philosophical critiques to the best skills in boat repair. A polymath, as Andy called him early, who drew on complex sources of knowledge to solve problems. He was highly educated and a gentleman, but not above himself in his social relationships. All were well met. He loved the arts and music, good food and good drink, along with good crack, which, by the way, he knew was from the Scottish and Ulster Gaelic and had only been appropriated by the Irish in the past 100 years or so. I do remember that conversation with him. He loved to laugh, and it was infectious and cheering when he did. He was a good and generous friend, although he could also be quite Scottish with a penny. He loved Marjorie deeply and joyfully, finding true happiness in her company. For 35 years or so, I experienced the grace of being his friend and then Marjorie's. We didn't live in one another's pockets, but we did share many friends and introduced one another to them. We shared many social and political passions, although we carried those actions out in different ways, but toward the same ends. The other tie that bound us together was that we were both come from a ways, foreigners, who had fallen deeply in love with Cape Breton Island and didn't want to leave it. I could tell many anecdotes from those years, but I'll content myself with sharing one that I think says so much about Silver Donald's devoted heart and feisty spirit. Several of you, either watching or in the room, know that I arrived at what was then called the University College of Cape Breton in 1993, after what had been a number of very challenging years at the institution. It was not a happy place, and there was much to be done. The task of academic organization is not an easy one at any university. As scholars in different disciplines, most of us were trained to become increasingly narrow in our views, particularly the relative importance of our disciplines and our own research. For most of us, of course, that meant it was our own discipline and our own research that was primary, and others were subsidiary in different degrees, sort of like the ancient caste system in India. In search of fresh thinking, I asked Silver Donald to come to UCCB to be dean of a new division of community studies. And he was the first, you're right, Andy. He leapt at the challenge. We were also still in the early stages of defining new relationships with our Mi'kmaq neighbors. And the idea emerged that we should do something to more effectively encourage First Nations students to consider science studies. With the aid of a small grant from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, we were able to learn from others elsewhere about how this should be done, and a degree proposal that combined Western and traditional knowledge, applied in practical community settings, emerged to be considered by academic council, considered on many occasions. The battle turned fierce. The physical scientists and some in the social sciences argued that the only true means of conducting research was to use the classic Western scientific method to collect measurable empirical evidence and experiments related to a hypothesis. Kind of makes you wonder how the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Aztecs, the Mayans, and tons of different indigenous groups got so scientifically smart without the benefit of the advice of Aristotle and Sir Francis Bacon. This academic debate raged on for many meetings. Silver Donald held his tongue for the longest time. As you know, that was often a very difficult job for him. He became increasingly physically uncomfortable, squirming in his chair and tapping a foot. Finally, after a particularly superior-sounding colleague expressed the view that a degree program should not be watered down by introducing multiple inferior models of research and spending time, gasp, on practical applications, rather than devoting oneself to scholarly reflection and research. At that point, Silver Donald leapt to his feet and proclaimed, "I've been teaching English literature in well-known universities for more than 20 years in bachelor's and master's programs, and I have never met an English major who didn't want to get a job when they graduated." It was emotional and passionate, but it also shut a few people up. It was a fine and persuasive declaration by a Renaissance thinker, a social activist, an adventure-loving bon vivant, whom I was privileged to call a friend. I miss you, Donald, as do we all.
First Dean of Community Studies. That explains a lot. We have some pre-recorded segments. The next one draws us into Don's relationship with the Men of the Deeps. I think that's the next clip that we have. And then there's two other pre-recorded sessions that feature two of our organizers, Terry Gibbs and Tracy Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Catherine Arsenault from Cape Breton University, and thank you to the coordinators for the opportunity to speak with you a little bit this afternoon. I'm actually here in the Performance Hall at the Miners Museum with Yogi Muse, representing the Men of the Deeps. When coordinators were pulling together this event for today, we kind of thought that maybe a piece of music would be very appropriate for the celebration of life for Silver Donald Cameron. And in thinking around what maybe I could bring to the program that would enlighten others around a piece of the life of Silver Donald, I was reminded of several conversations I had with Jack O'Donnell, former director of the Men of the Deeps. While he was writing a book in about 2016 that would mark the 50th anniversary of the chorus, he recounted a story that in 1976, the Men of the Deep were, I believe, the first performing choir invited into China for a tour. And on that tour, Silver Donald Cameron accompanied the choir. Now, knowing that they couldn't have a journalist along, he was an honorary tenor in the choir for that 3-week tour of China. But during that time, he was documenting the trip, and it informed several articles later on. I thought from Jack O'Donnell's book, I would share the following piece that he writes in his book around that experience. So journalist Silver Donald Cameron, traveling with the Men of the Deeps as an honorary member of the tenor section, was struck by the seriousness of the demeanor of the workers, and this was in the airport as they had arrived in China. And Don suggested, "Jack, why don't you have the men sing a song before we leave?" Jack responded, "That's all it took." The group sang "Jolly Wee Miner Men," Silver Donald joining in the tenor part, and it seems the whole world changed. All of a sudden, the atmosphere turned friendly, with smiles and handshakes all around. And isn't that just a lovely way to sum up Silver Donald Cameron? His impact was to bring about change, and change for the better, and better for the human circumstance, bringing humor and laughter to all of our lives. Now we'll move on with a few words from Yogi Muse on behalf of the Men of the Deeps. Thank you, Yogi, for joining us this afternoon.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I'm here introducing Yogi Muse, who's a member with the Men of the Deeps chorus. And Yogi, as I was telling people a little bit earlier, Silver Donald had maybe a bit of an unknown connection with the Men of the Deeps back in the 1970s, 1976, I think it was. Travels to China. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
We were lucky. In those days, all of the daily newspapers across the country had a syndicated weekend edition, that different writers were seconded to put in print some interesting stories. Anyway, he was able to convince, or somebody was, that he should come to China with the Men of the Deeps. And he was successful, and his articles appeared in three separate weeks, and very minute detail. It was very well done, and Men of the Deeps appreciate it. They gave us a lot of exposure, and certainly to Silver Donald also, who wound up being a pretty good guy.
So he traveled with the men then for about a 3-week period, was that tour?
He traveled for 17 days. We were in China, yeah, and in fact, we had him rooming with our professor, Jack O'Donnell, and I'm sure the two of them were in cahoots about what we would sing and how we would approach certain situations. But he very quickly became one of the Men of the Deeps for that 17 days.
I heard from Jack O'Donnell that he was taken into the tenor section and probably the only honorary tenor to ever have performed with the men. Was that a usual event to happen?
Most of the places that we traveled, we were in our civilian clothes. We didn't have the mining gear on. It would have been awkward. So he fit right in. We all dressed in whatever clothes we had to take at the time. When we did a major concert, we put the mining gear on. But nobody knew Silver Donald was a reporter, except he was a pretty nosy reporter. I've seen him many, many times talking to young people, and he was trying to probe them and get the history of the politics in China and whatever. That was Silver Donald. He was excellent at what he did.
Absolutely. And so certainly the documentation that he was able to capture of that trip. Am I right in saying that it was the first performing choral tour in China?
That's what they're billing it as, yeah. It was in the time of Chairman Mao. We certainly didn't see Chairman Mao, but we went up in northern China towards the Manchurian border. That's where their coal mines were. And people, like a group of college professors, couldn't have gotten the tour that we were on because they were considering the Men of the Deeps as a working, and everybody in China has to have a stint. Doctors, lawyers, teachers. They wanted everybody to see how the other half lived and survived. So the fact that we were billed as the Men of the Deeps coal miners, union people, that was important to the Chinese to cater to us. So towards the Manchurian border and their coal mines, nobody goes up there, Caucasians, but we went up there because it was very, very interesting. But the people never saw the likes of the Men of the Deeps before, and they were pretty well awed by what they saw.
Well, and that just set a tone for the rest of the Men of the Deep's career. They've always been such showstoppers wherever they've gone.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun, a lot of good trips. We've been to Kosovo, we've been to China, we've been to every province in Canada and most of the United States, and some great trips with Rita. It's been a great career for us guys.
Now, I thought maybe you brought in today a little bit of your diary as well that you were keeping during your trip. And just wondering if there was anything there that you might want to share with us.
Well, especially somewhere over the Sea of Japan. We were on the plane coming back. I was sitting close to Silver Donald, and I asked him to put some of his observations down, and he was good enough. He included 2 pages, which you may be able to see on the screen later. But it was it was Silver Donald talking. You could tell the guy was an expert. He was a lovable fella, and he very quickly became one of the men of the deeps. We could have initiated him very quickly.
Thank you. I know that we asked for today's ceremony maybe to have a selection of a tune from the Men of the Deep's repertoire play in honor of Silver Donald this afternoon. And I think in honor of the trip to China, we were going to look at playing the tune
Jolly Wee Miner Men, yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that Jolly Wee Miner Men tune.
It's one of the numbers, it's an easy one to pick up, and it's done a cappella. There's no instrumentation. And it's, in fact, we used to call it the airport song because we did sing it. The Men of the Deeps would be traveling someplace, and if a stewardess on board an aircraft said, "How about singing a song?" we'd send her to the director, and he'd stand and we'd do our thing, and we'd sit down again. And it was, like you said, because we did it, we think we started doing it in China. Mm-hmm. And it was Silver Donald suggested to Jack, let's sing for them. And the very serious young Chinese people, but as soon as we opened their mouths, the smiles came. And we knew we had something going. So just about everywhere we go now, we'll sing in the airport, we'll sing on the aircraft. You ask, we'll do it. You give us a meal, we go to a church hall, and they feed us, we sing for them when we're done. It's just, if you're a choir, why not sing?
And that's the joy of singing and in choral singing, isn't it?
Right on.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Yogi. And now we'll have the recorded playing of Jolly Wee Miner Men.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Men of the Deeps.
We're all jolly wee miner men, and miner men are we. We have traveled through Canada for many's a long key. We have traveled east and traveled west, this country round and round, for to find out the treasure that lie beneath the ground. Oh, some have got money and some have none at all, but when we've got money, the bottle we will drown, and we'll fill our glasses right up to the brim as the toast goes passing round. Here's my health to every wee miner man that goes below the ground. We're all jolly wee miner men, and miner men are we. We have traveled through Canada for many's a long key. We have traveled east and traveled west, this country round and round, for to find out the treasures that lie beneath the ground.
A couple more stories to go. I'm not sure if these were recorded. They're together. Okay, so maybe just one more. Terry Gibbs and Tracy Harris, colleagues of Silver Donald in the political science department, and two of our co-organizers here for this afternoon. So maybe we'll play that recording now.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm Tracy Harris, and this is my colleague Terry Gibbs, and we're from the Department of ILNU, Political and Social Studies at Cape Breton University. And it's our great honor to be here today to say a few words about our colleague and collaborator and dear friend, Silver Donald Cameron. Back in 2017, Richard Keshen and Terry and I were working on developing a new speaker series called the Compassionate Communities, or Living as If We Give a Damn series. And we were trying to think of someone who would be really great to start our event. And Richard wisely suggested Don and said that his new film called Green Rights, The Human Right to a Healthy World, would be a great way to begin. And Don kindly agreed to do so. And our first impressions of Don were that he had boundless energy. He was so generous with his time and had such a commitment to building community and to social and environmental justice, and an optimism that we really could each make an important difference. Anyone who's had the opportunity or perhaps misfortune to do work on a project with Terry and I knows that we often take one smaller event and leverage it to its max. And Don kindly got swept up into our enthusiasm, and he generously agreed to show his film twice, to do a presentation about his book, Warrior Lawyers. He was on a panel for climate change and came to countless classes to give presentations and so much more. And one of the things that really stood out for me about Don in the classroom setting was just how kind and generous he was to our students. He was really interested in what they had to say, and they left class feeling not only inspired by what Don had to say, but optimistic that they would have an opportunity to make a difference in the world.
And I think that was also a connecting point for Tracy and I with Don, that we all kind of share this belief that ordinary people can and do change the world all the time in positive directions. And I think we all also shared this idea that education is such a transformative space for social change, and we particularly connected around the environment and climate change issues. And we had a lot of fun working with Don, as Tracy said. He made us laugh, lots of fun. And one of the events that we organized, it was in January of 2019. And it was a big deal because we were bringing in Bill McKibben virtually. And Don had kindly agreed to say some opening words and talk a little bit about his work as a kind of lead-in. Well, turned out there were the technological glitches that we all deal with all the time. And Bill wasn't able to connect in for an hour. So we had this massive room of people sitting there waiting. And Don just stepped right up and he said, "Don't worry, I've got this." And he went in front of the audience and started talking and doing his Don thing. Had everybody, you know, on the edge of their seats and listening and enthusiastic, and managed to keep the whole event running smoothly. And we were so thankful. And that event was called Dumb Ways to Die, Why You Don't Have to Be a Superhero to Save the Planet. Well, that was the spirit of Don, is that you don't have to be a superhero, but I think Tracy and I both kind of think Don was a superhero for the planet. And we're just so thankful to have worked with him, to have experienced his energy and goodwill and optimism. And we thank you for that, Don, and for your friendship. And we'll really miss you.
What a lovely note to end on. I know we have one segment left. Is that right? It says Toyota tailpipe. I can honestly say I have no idea what that is. So I'm not sure if it's coming in through the door. Okay, I didn't know if it was coming in or dropping down or if it was on the screen. It's just a tune that we'll go out on. Is that right? Okay. Okay, wonderful. Well, maybe before we cue that up, I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for such a splendid afternoon, such a wonderful sharing of stories and recollections about somebody that we all cared so much about. Special thanks to the many people and offices at CBU that contributed and supported, especially the Celebration Planning Committee. We're grateful for the convent and for NovaStream for handling the space and the logistics. And please, Jackie, extend a special thank you to Don's widow. Those were wonderful remarks, and we were very grateful for them as well. Overall, I'd say it was just a community of goodwill and effort for someone who valued both of those things so very, very much. So thank you all very much for coming. It was wonderful to see you all. We'll play a tune on the way out, and please, there's lots of food, drinks, snacks left, and if you'd like to stick around to chat, I'm sure people would enjoy that too. But thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.